Well, I think we could say that we finally found out what's wrong with our big bore 572 cylinder. And I hate to admit it, but it's because we didn't start with a real 572. So that extra volume definitely didn't help us. But we'll go into that in a little more detail in this video. Welcome back, everyone. Today we got the blacked out 572 XP, the big bore with the iron sleeve. I mentioned in one of my other videos, I found a piston that might work a little bit better for this saw. Still 51 millimeter, but the strato cutouts line up a little better. So today we're going to tear this one down, swap out that piston, and change up the porting. So today we'll be tearing this one down, changing up the porting, and swapping this piston. Want to try and get this fully dialed in 100%. That way we can put this recipe into the cylinders to be plated. So we'll get this one all tore down. Already got the muffler off of it. Well, this 572 chassis, having the long stroke like it does, I definitely think it's a good option for our big bores. Because we're trying to outrun the 500i's. Bore looks good, nothing else changed there. So nothing changed on the bore, but you can see, well, you probably can't see, I'll show you when I pull it off. But I have the score mark on the piston, just cleaned up the rings a little bit. And when I built this one, I left the ports lower than stock. So now we're going to start raising them up closer to where our ported 572s are. So I don't know how well you can see, but I have not run this saw, I don't even know, quite a while. Quite a while. Let me get this light. You can see how much oil has drained down to the bottom. That's what that streak is there on the pistons. Everything else, like I said, this is just 40-to-1 Dominator. Now the marks on the piston, like I said, it's been scored a couple of times. And let me flip it, show you the exhaust side. Right up there, you can see the score on the exhaust side. But that was from the early runs. But the actual oil film itself is what I want to show off. Like I said, that's 40-to-1, and it's been sitting a good month or two. But that's why the extra oil and good quality oil is important. So here's the two pistons. You can see here's the marks on the exhaust side from where we seized this sleeve up one time. But the new one doesn't have this notch, which we might add back in sometime. But the strato ports on the new one, the notch drops down lower, more similar to stock. This one stays up higher. The weights are almost identical on these two. So we're going to get our new one all swapped in, but it's just those couple little differences. And like I said, you can still see the oil that's stuck. You can still see the oil that's stuck underneath this piston. Hasn't been ran, like I mentioned before, in a couple of months. And this is all the lubrication that these bottom ends see. So that's why we recommend good oil, because when you do start this up, that's all going to get mixed in, go right to the bearings. But we'll get this swapped over, get that timing changed up. 0. All the way back around. So 162. So we have 162 duration on the intake. That means top dead center is half of that. So right at 81. All right. Got that exhaust at 99. 99, 118, 81. I'm going to bump it up a little bit. We're going to go 96-ish on the exhaust, probably 116-ish on the transfers, and we'll leave the intake alone. So we're going to try this different piston, which does change the strato timing. We'll bump the exhaust up a couple degrees, transfers up a couple degrees. That seems to work pretty well on the 48 millimeters, so we'll see how it works on this 51. And I'm hoping the strato fix alone will help the carb, but if not, I have another throttle plate I can put in it. The stock, and we can just work on opening that up a little bit at a time. I went a little bit excessive with it, but that's how we learn. So we'll get this one all laid out, finish the port work, put it all back together, and see how it runs and what kind of power it makes. Alright, here's our cylinder. I opened up that impulse notch a little more, raised and flattened the transfers, and we raised the exhaust. So everything else the same. More transfer duration, more exhaust duration, and a little bit better direction. So I threw on the Steadfast forestry muffler. It's a nice stainless steel piece, very heavy duty muffler. I did pull the screen out of this one, but we'll get this fueled up and test fired to see if this piston swap helped the idle any at all, or changing the porting, which the porting shouldn't have much to do with it. But we'll see. All right. I guess we'll put it all together. We'll pretend that it's going to work right. Alright, primer bulb. Choke. Wish me luck. I don't know if it'll do it. Hey, that might actually idle now. We get a bar and chain thrown on it. I still have that 16-inch test log out there, so I'll probably put like a 20-inch bar on it. And we'll go make a few cuts. Then we'll put it on the dyno, see what kind of power it's making. see. I don't know if that fixed the idle or not. I did shut it off right as it was coming down. That's a whole lot better than it was. We'll go over and take a couple cuts off the round log. Alright, so this is our turn, 16-inch poplar log. It's been weathered a few weeks now, but still just a good test log. And the diameter's true all the way down. Uh-oh, it's doing the idle thing. Just enough it doesn't want to idle when it gets fully warm like that. That's one thing. I wish we just had an idle screw on these, because the top RPM seems to be holding good. Oh. It'll start every time on high idle. So I'll have to adjust that carb plate ever so slightly. Alright, so we're super close to having this one dialed in on that idle. It's like right there. If it just had that idle screw like a normal saw, would be all set. But I'm going to wait on that for a minute. We'll get these dyno pulls done. But I was really hoping opening up that impulse notch in the cylinder a little bit more was going to help. I thought it looked a little bit restricted, and I think it did help. It seems to be fueling real good up top. Those cuts sure sounded good. They felt pretty good. We'll check the times in a little bit, but I don't know, maybe we can make this one a contender for the 5 cube at Sawfest. And for those wondering, our new piston is actually a gram or two lighter than the stock 572 piston. So that works out real good, no balance issues. I definitely think these big bore 572s have a place. But before we get to the dyno, I want to show you another project that's super close, because you guys stuck with me this far. This is 550 Mark II chassis. And we have the 550 Mark II cylinder, but it has something hiding under the top. Let me loosen these. And I'm sure you can guess what's hiding under there, but I'll show you up close. it go. Ta-da! Now you probably can't tell from the camera, but this is a 562 XP piston. So this is 3mm oversized, which would bring this little critter up to that 57cc mark, not far off of the 57cc 357s. But fits like a glove, almost like it's supposed to. Same size wrist pin. Now this one is a little bit heavier, but if I'm not mistaken, the main bearings are real close to the same size as 562 anyway. But I think I'm going to try and have a couple of these done. And the only thing that I don't like about this is that intake notch on this piston. That gives us a lot of intake duration. So it's running about 170 degrees duration, or intake opening at 85 degrees. So that's a lot for this. Now there's two things we can do, and I'll probably just do one cylinder for now. I'll try and finish it myself, and we'll just epoxy up this intake to do that. Either that, or we could try welding the piston, or before I bore the next one, we could weld this intake up and then rebore everything, be good to go, which that might be an option, but I'll test it with the epoxy. So let me know what your thoughts are on a 57, high 57cc Husqvarna 550. Like I said, this would only be the Mark IIs. They're a little bit more popular, a little bit more robust, but I think this could make a monster little 50cc saw once it's all done, and we will be slowly moving forward with our big bore 550. So I figured while we were talking about 572, I'd show you just real quick sneak peek of our big bore 550. Said the numbers landed real well without even porting. We had, like I said, 85 on the intake, 101.5 on the exhaust, and 116 on the transfer. So those are all very workable, and I don't know, other than reshaping and cleaning, probably won't change them too much, because that's not, other than the intake, not far off of where our work 550s are. But let me leave a comment, let me know. Like I said, we'll get this one all strapped on the dyno. But I just wanted to show the big bore 550. This is the first one, and it's looking pretty promising. So let's get those guesses in on the power output, and we'll get these pulls done. It's rather disappointing, kind of like this one has been most along the way. But we're going to try and redeem ourselves. We're going to swap the cylinder piston muffler over to our ported 572. 572, now I don't think they're any different. Well, I do know the 572 has the taller style, larger air filter, and the full circle crank. So we'll see. I did a little bit of testing on the dyno. The bigger filter did help over this low top, smaller filter. But we're going to see what and if this big bore will run out better on this 572. We're like 7 3/4 horse. So that just goes to show that just because it looks cool, sounds pretty good, and seems to cut pretty decent, doesn't mean that it's really making the power. So hopefully swapping over to a true 572 will give us what we're looking for. And if not, we might have to try and modify that piston a little bit. Maybe even go in and try and epoxy in the straddle ports, get them back to OEM level. I do know they're not 100% right, but I'm kind of at a loss. Like I said, I really wanted this to work because I think 80cc 572 really does have potential. But if we can't get at least that 8.5 horse out of it, it's not really any better than porting your regular 572. It does have all sorts of torque, but like I said, we can get really close to that same kind of power and better cutting speed power out of the 572 currently. So I'm going to really quickly tear down this one, swap everything over to our 572, and we'll come back and get those after runs. So I just want to show, like I said, just pulled this off. You can see how much oil we have on that. Just running our 40-to-1. So no marks on it. But we'll get this all swapped over. I just want to show the kind of oil film that we have left over with our Dominator. You can see it sticking underneath the piston here. So let me get this finished taken off, switch it over to our 572 bottom end. So you can see right here, this is the open bottom end of the 565. There's no stuffers. Once I get the 572 tore down, I'll show you that. But you can see there's the counterweights for the crankshaft. So this is all open volume underneath the piston. So the 572 has spacers and stuffers that make that a full circle and take up all that extra volume. So I'll show you that once we get that far. But I just wanted to show the oil film left on this piston here. Alright, here's the 572 all tore down. You can see that oil film again. But these are the crank stuffers. See, they take up all the space down there in the bottom end. But this is also the notch that we're missing. So I might add that back onto our new piston once we get these runs done. But I just want to see simply swapping over to stuffed bottom end, and this is a true 572 carb and ignition, flywheel, everything. I don't think they're different, but like I said, this is all true 572. So we'll get this piston swapped out, clean up the base, stick down our new cylinder, and we're going to use the Steadfast muffler again. So I'll be back in a minute. But yeah, look at that film right there. Nice and oily 40-to-1 Dominator. And you can see it puddles down good into the case. That's all the lube that this bottom end will see. So it's might as well spend it on an oil that sticks. So that's all the lubrication that these bottom ends see, so you might as well spend it on an oil that sticks around. Alrighty, here she is, everything all swapped over. So we'll get this one fueled up, fired up, make sure everything sounds good. And we'll put on the dyno, see if a true 572 is making better power than our blacked out 565. So we'll get this one fired off, see how it acts. So let me know what you think. You think the full circle crank will make more power than our open pork chop crank on the 565? Get this one bolted down and we're going to find out. So these will be the first true runs of a big bore 572. This is our same big bore kit, same piston, but on a true 572 this time. But that is the same big log full 572 big bore. Everything the same as what it was the black saw, but we have the bigger filter and we have the full circle crank, and it really seemed to like it. So that goes to show on these saws that the stuffed tighter crankcase definitely is the way to go. And we'll look at the power graph, but just feeling it and seeing that graph, I would definitely be happy with a bolt-on like that. This is the bolt-on muffler. This is 572, would be a bolt-on kit, and just a simple timing advance. Now before we finally dial these in, I am going to try modify the piston a little bit, make the notches match, and I'm going to take the caps off of these transfer tunnels and aim it just a little bit better to see if we can get, I'd really like to get a little bit more than the 8.5 that we got out of it. So let me pull this off and we will print out that dyno graph and go over those. But so this whole time I was fighting with that blacked out 565, and it was the extra volume and the smaller filter that was really hurting the power from the 572. Now the 572 ignition must be a little bit different, because I was getting 300 or 400 RPM more RPM free spin than I was getting with the 565. But both of them had about the same timing advance, and this was the same exact piston, cylinder, muffler, everything that was on the other saw. Same thing, that rings still need time to seat in and everything else, so I expect the power to bump up a little bit as this breaks in. But that's what we have for today. Now we'll look at the graph and we'll see the actual power numbers on paper. So this is what we have. We got a bunch of lines on here, so bear with me. This red line was the ported 572 before we swapped to the big bore. This was just a cylinder I was playing with, trying some different recipes in, and it was making 7.78 horse, 4.34 foot-pounds, which that's not too awful far from most of our ported 572s. And then we did this green line right here. This is the big bore black saw. Right after our piston swap, we got 7.69 and 4.83 foot-pounds, which you can see a lot more torque and really close to matching the power output of our ported 572. So I did a timing advance and swapped to the bigger 572 filter, and we bumped up power just a little bit, 7.71, but the torque really jumped, 5.21 foot-pounds, and you can see it really flattened out the curve on our big bore saw. So after that, that was still our black 565, the open case saw. Then we swapped it over to a true 572 with the stuffers, big filter, big top cover, and slightly different coil. You can see how none of these reach out quite as far other than the 572. That red line, you can see it's hitting the same RPM as our big bore. Where the 565, it stops just short. So there is something different in that ignition, letting the 572s run out just a couple hundred RPM higher. But blue line, super flat, broadband, tabletop. That's something that you'd be proud of to see in a big bore. 5.44 foot-pounds. That's all sorts of torque out of this little husky. I mean, just look at the jump between our ported one, which has better torque than stock, all the way out here. Just super flat power band. Well, like I said, I'd really like to see this a little bit higher, because I want this to be something that can outrun the ported 500i's. But we got 8.53 horse, 5.44 foot-pounds on that run, and I think there's still more to be had. But let me know what you think, and until next time, thanks a lot, everyone.